refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt.
Welcome to another episode of Black and White and Thin Blue Lines. My name is Clarke Ahlers.
And I'm Serge Antonin.
And we have a special guest today, Miss Lauren Pountnay.
Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lauren is a rising senior at NC State. She hopes to continue with a career in law. She's working as my intern law clerk this summer. And the reason that she's a special guest on today's podcast will become pretty obvious in a moment. Our topic today is the trial, the United States of America versus Hunter Biden.
More than 5 years now, the United States Attorney David Weiss, originally appointed by Donald Trump, investigated Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, as we all know, for failing to pay his taxes and possession of a handgun by a drug user. On July 20th, 2023, the Department of Justice reached a plea deal in the case, and Hunter Biden was to plead guilty to 2 counts of failure to pay taxes, which are misdemeanors, and the gun possession case, which was to be handled by a diversion agreement with Hunter Biden agreeing to drug treatment and monitoring by the Department of Justice for 2 years, and then the gun case could be dismissed. On July 26th, 2023, Judge Mary Ellen Noriega put the matter on hold. Atypical and not so straightforward was this move. The judge asked if the deal would give immunity to Hunter Biden in any future criminal cases. The assistant U.S. attorney said there would be another investigation. Hunter Biden's lawyers then called the plea deal null and void. Ultimately, Hunter Biden pled not guilty in front of Noriega, and the government filed an indictment.
Hunter was charged with 3 crimes. The first crime was false statement in the purchase of a firearm. The second crime was false statement related to information required to be kept by a federal firearms licensed dealer. And the third crime was possession of a firearm by a person who is an unlawful user of or addicted to a controlled substance. All 3 crimes were a felony. Hunter Biden's trial, a jury trial, began on Monday, June 3rd, 2024, and it ran until Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. On Tuesday, June 11th, 2024, after just 3 hours of jury deliberation, 1 hour the day before and 2 hours on Tuesday, June 11th, the jury returned a guilty verdict to all 3 charges. The reason Lauren's a guest today is on Wednesday, June 5th, 2024, Lauren and I attended the trial in Wilmington, Delaware. We're going to be talking about what we witnessed and what we thought.
Now, I couldn't be there because I had prior engagements, although I heard it was very interesting, so we're going to find that out.
It definitely was. I thought it was just an honor to be there, for one. Clarke, worked his magic and got us in there.
Clarke Ahlers magic.
Yeah, it was, a historical event to be witnessing firsthand, and as someone who's, pursuing hopefully a future career in law, it was definitely really exciting to be able to see and get the opportunity to do that.
We were closer than the furthest wall in this office to Hunter Biden, the president's wife, Jill Biden, Valerie Biden, the president's sister. Judge Noriega was a little further away. We were very close to Abby Lowell, the famous defense attorney. We saw Kevin Morris. Kevin Morris is the fellow who's depicted in the news as Hunter Biden's sugar daddy. He's the lawyer friend, famously proud of, I guess, giving millions of dollars to Hunter Biden to pay off his federal taxes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
More importantly, we saw courtroom artist Bill Hennessy, who is nationally, really internationally renowned, probably has seen more trials than any one person in the United States. And the 2 prosecutors in the case who I've previously met, Derek Hines and Leo Wise, were the prosecutors for the United States Attorney.
Now, what did the jury look like?
Well, Delaware is 22.5% African American.
Okay, the state of Delaware.
State of Delaware. Okay. And the jury, now we were looking at 14 or 15 people, meaning some of the people we were looking at were alternates, and Lauren and I did not know who the alternates were.
Gotcha.
But of the 14 or 15 people we saw, 7 appeared to be African American.
Okay.
There were only 2 white males. I actually remember commenting to Lauren that I thought it was a very defense favorable jury.
And why is that?
Well, ordinarily, minorities are considered to be defense favorable in the sense that as a group, they've probably been more oppressed by government than white males. And so typically, it's thought by the defense bar, and in this case, you had 2 white male prosecutors. Typically, it's thought that minorities might not be as quick to simply accept at face value what a white FBI agent says and what white prosecutors present. So that's the thought.
You know, I would
not,
look at-
not saying it's
I got
100%
you.
accurate.
But you know why I would think that might be a little different in this case? Because they might look at Hunter Biden as seeming to be super entitled. You
I
understand
think
what I mean?
that, yes, I do. I think that was a practical problem, and I don't. We'll talk in a moment about Abby Lowell.
Okay.
I'm not sure why Hunter Biden chose a white male attorney who also might be associated with that of privilege. I probably, if I were Hunter Biden, would have chosen. I have some ideas of who I would have chosen. It would not have been Abby Lowell.
But it might be the arrogance of having the privilege. You don't have that. He does, as we've seen. In my opinion, that's my opinion. I don't know.
Well, I know I don't have it.
I know you don't have it. That's
But Lauren, what did you think? Did you think the jury was automatically receptive, or did you think they looked like they were open-minded?
I think they were open-minded. They all seemed interested.
They did.
I did notice that there were about 3 or 4 people who were not taking notes, while everyone else, had a notepad out, was really engaged, making sure they were getting, all the details. And I think for other people, they kind of wanted to just maybe get a feel from the
I will
defense.
tell you that I've done plenty of jury trials, and there are jurors who don't take notes, and there are jurors who take copious notes. One of the instructions, we weren't there for the original jury instructions, but frequently judges will tell jurors they're welcome to take notes, but they're also encouraged to pay attention, not be so focused on note
taking
taking
notes, yeah.
That
that
is
you're
true.
not looking at the demeanor of the witness, physical exhibits, and so forth.
That is true. And I would think that, it is, like we said, a historic trial. It's the first time that a sitting president's son or any child is in
Is the
facing
defendant-
federal charges.
Right.
So I definitely think that had people interested, the jury, I know if I was on the jury, I would be locked in.
Well, our nation's seeing quite a few historical firsts. I mean, you got the first time a former president was convicted of 34 felonies and is still running for president, which is that's a whole conversation for a whole nother day.
Well, let's talk about the witnesses. The first witness was FBI agent Erica Jensen. What was you're a young woman, and Erica Jensen looked to be a fairly young woman to me. I don't want to estimate her age because I might
Mess it
err
up.
one way or another, but she definitely did not look like a senior FBI agent. She looked young and I would think fairly new.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I thought it was definitely maybe slightly just not what you would expect. You would expect the head FBI agent on this case to maybe be a little bit older, but I thought she conducted herself well on.
One of the things she did was on cross-examination when Abby Lowell would ask questions where the obvious answer was I don't know or I didn't investigate that, she would quickly concede it. She wouldn't argue with Abby Lowell like a lot of witnesses do. I notice a lot of police officers, for example, if you ask a question which might make them look like they didn't conduct a complete investigation, they'll resist you and say, well, just a second, let me explain. But she didn't do any of that, and I thought it worked very well to her advantage.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, she definitely did seem very professional and well versed.
She certainly
what
did.
was going on.
And as we'll get to redirect in a moment, the redirects were, including hers, were phenomenal. Next, we had the ex-wife, which we saw Kathleen Buell, And what
Whoa,
was your...
that's always a wild card.
That was definitely a wake-up call. You know, it was the first witness to come to the stand that I think everyone kind of sat up in their seats for, was ready to hear what she had to say. I was honestly expecting a little bit more, though. I thought, at least my impression of it was she was kind of holding back.
You thought she might do some cussing?
Maybe, or just be more like, you know, it's his ex-wife. I was expecting her to get up there and, like, we'll hear about the girlfriend, Zoe, next. Like,
Okay.
she was giving
That's
us the whole story, giving everything. And the ex-wife was more, I think, reserved and maybe trying to not fully trash him. And Clarke and I were saying, like, we were wondering why that might have been. And, you know, their children together.
And maybe that was part of it. Maybe, and plus, maybe she just had more class than the girlfriend.
no.
I mean, you can't overlook that.
I think the fact that they have children together definitely would make her want to, you know, not fully get up on the stand and trash her ex-husband for their sake, to not put that kind of divide. But that's just my hypothesis.
That's because you've never been married.
Well, the girlfriend, Zoe Keston, was the next witness, and one of the most interesting witnesses for a couple of reasons, which I'm just going to tell our audience. Zoe Keston met Hunter in what was called
A gentleman's club.
Gentleman's Club. I forgot the euphemism for strip joint, but she met Hunter, and she said within 15 minutes of meeting him, where she was supposed to be providing him with a private dance, he started smoking crack in her presence.
In the strip club?
Yes. Well, on a balcony, I think she said, of the club.
I don't know how much of that I'd believe, but all right.
Well, she went on to say that she became his girlfriend for about a 14-month period, and a couple things that stood out. First of all, and this is sexist of me to say, but of course, I shared my opinion with Lauren at the time. She was wholesome looking. She did not appear to be in the adult industry.
Most strippers are wholesome looking, Clarke. Most that I've
I wouldn't
encountered.
know. But the point is, she looked very wholesome, and she talked about wanting to do a fashion line. She'd been to college. She was very well spoken. Her memory was incredible to time, dates, and so forth.
Definitely.
And it hurt because her testimony was that Hunter Biden was smoking crack every 20 minutes when he was alone, and every hour when he was in the company of others. Like if they went out socially, he was smoking crack he'd excuse
I'm sorry, but I don't believe it.
When she was up there telling these stories, I mean, it definitely was hard to believe right off the
It
bat,
sounds pretty hard
but
to believe.
after the evidence and everything that was presented, and I mean, she didn't budge. She was not that. In cross-examination, they were trying to get her.
Well, one of the things that might have
not
made
budging.
this story more credible, and I thought the U.S. attorneys did an outstanding job of preparing the witnesses and the evidence, is not only did she testify that Hunter Biden was smoking crack every 20 minutes, but he, on average, withdrew $16,000 of cash per day.
Wow.
So that
Can be proven.
Well,
Yeah.
that was proven.
Yeah.
And additionally, they had photographic evidence. She would take pictures of him passed out. She'd take pictures of the hotel rooms he
I
trashed.
personally didn't know crack was that expensive, but I guess
Well,
it's inflation.
Well, he was also spending money on hotel rooms.
Okay.
He started buying, according to her testimony, while they were staying in Los Angeles, he started buying large amounts of cocaine so that he could make his own crack. That she went on the internet and found the instructions for making it for him. They had a little kitchenette in one of their places they stayed in Los Angeles, and he was cooking the crack cocaine. And I'll tell you, I'm a skeptic by nature, particularly when it's the stripper ex-girlfriend coming to testify. But she did things which, again, and I told Lauren this, I thought made her far more credible, and I don't think the defense picked up on it. She repeatedly described Hunter in very affectionate ways. She said he was charming, that he was very intelligent. She did not condemn him. She presented him as an addict but as a high-functioning addict who was a nice guy. Now, Lauren had a different take on whether he was a nice guy or not.
Yeah, I do not think Hunter Biden is a nice guy, but...
What makes you say that, Lauren?
Well, the evidence was, overwhelming, to say the least. The defense attorney was not doing well up there, and I feel like the prosecutors, and especially after Zoe, is how you pronounce her name?
Yes.
Yeah, especially after Zoe's testimony, I thought right then and there, honestly, it was over. Like, the way she just conducted herself and told the story and portrayed him, it wasn't just yes, no, like everyone else who went up there. She would tell you more about it, even without being prompted. And it made kind of like a whole picture.
And they used her as bookends around the date, October 12th, 2018, when he purchased the gun, so that he acted like an addict before that date and after that date. And that was very effective. The next witness was a man named Gordon Cleveland. I thought he was an incredibly effective witness for the prosecution for a couple of reasons, and I think Abby Lowell made a critical error in judgment in how he cross-examined this man. This man was African American, middle-aged. He worked as a garbage truck driver, I believe, for the city of Wilmington. He had a part-time job working at the gun store.
Okay.
And he came across, to me, very, very knowledgeable, very credible. He talked about the kind of car that Hunter Biden drove up in. And in fact, on cross-examination, somebody said, how do you know how he, And he says, because there's two things I like, cars and guns. And he just...
There you have it.
It was
The whole
credible to
courtroom
me.
laughed.
Right.
But it sounds true.
It
rings
sounds true. So I thought he did a very good job. In opening statement, Abby Lowell basically blamed him for the gun purchase, sort of like he
He should have
somehow
known.
persuaded Hunter to buy this gun, and that's not how it came across.
But even if he did, what does that have to do with him knowing or not knowing that Hunter was smoking crack every day?
Yeah, I don't know. One of the things that, to me, was just so, I guess, obvious about Gordon Cleveland that made him so credible is that Abby Lowell went after him, accusing him of having a nickname called the Whale Hunter. And what that meant was he was accused of trying to upsell customers. And he was very credible to me on response to those questions, saying, no, he didn't try to upsell customers except from a not-so-good weapon to a good weapon. He wasn't trying to say, you want to buy a handgun, I'm going to sell you a machine gun. But he was saying, if you're trying to buy a handgun, for this price, you can get a handgun which is quality, as opposed to what you're holding in your hand, which is going to be back in the repair shop in the first year.
We're talking about a country that's based on capitalism. What does that have to do with him? You know what I mean? I'm like,
I wouldn't have gone after.
yeah, like what does that have to do with anything?
This is where, if I could just jump ahead for a moment, this is where I think there was a wonderful opportunity for the defense that was basically wasted. I would have started out my cross-examination of Mr. Cleveland by first of all, making him the most credible person in the room. I'd have said, it's very clear to me you take your role as a firearms seller very seriously, and it was clear. And you made it clear in your testimony that you abide by federal law. You would not have sold a gun to anybody who appeared to be a drug addict, correct? And I'd have used that to try to say Hunter Biden wasn't presenting as a drug addict from a neutral government witness who was, at least shared a lot of characteristics with the jury. Wasn't a Biden, wasn't a wealthy person, and so forth. And again, I thought that was a wasted, I thought Abby Lowell basically cross-examined him, and I'm not kidding, for probably an hour on the color of the floor. Well, I'm being serious.
Where exactly they were standing in the store.
The color, he put a picture up of the interior of the gun store as though he were proud. Like his private investigator had gone in and scored a picture from inside the gun store. And it was so what? It was completely irrelevant.
It was.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and he kept like drilling Gordon about, oh, well, which way did he pull in? Are you sure? Are you sure you did? How did you see? Oh, there was a window? But where was the window? And it was just like everyone was
In the
just like,
front.
okay, come on, you're fishing here. You're really fishing, but you're not getting anywhere.
All right. Let me ask you about the direct examinations. What did you think about the U.S. attorneys?
I thought they did amazing.
Really?
I was going in there with Clarke, so I wanted to be like on the defense's side a little bit. I was kind of rooting for them to be doing good. But
And
I mean,
for the first time in history, Clarke was on the prosecution side.
Yes. No, I think we didn't. At first we went in there and we were excited to see what Abbe Lowell would bring to the table, I think, and the strategies he would use. And I think just witness after witness, I mean, every time he got up to the stand, I think we just got more and more disappointed in.
The courtroom was an old-fashioned federal courtroom in the sense that it did not have the technology which I'm used to in courtrooms generally and in federal courtrooms in particular. For example, in most federal courtrooms, there's a monitor in front of each juror. Instead, the prosecutors had to use a projection screen and basically a big drop-down screen like an old-fashioned movie theater. And nevertheless, I thought the prosecutors' direct examinations were tight.
Really?
No time was wasted. They would introduce the witness. They would literally go through 2-3 questions to develop their background. Where are you from? What do you do? Kind of, place them for the jury. And then, boom, right
That's
into
the
direct
point.
questions. Point, no further questions with exhibits. They'd sit down. Now, can we talk about the cross-examination for a
It
moment?
was just all
Let's
over
talk
the
about it.
place. I feel like the whole time, like I said, it kind of felt like he was fishing. He seemed like he was trying to stumble people up in their stories or find a mix-up somewhere, but all those witnesses were, I thought great witnesses.
They handled it well.
They've handled it very well, and honestly, when the prosecutors kind of made a joke out of him in a way because they would go up and be, tight and to the point, like Clarke said, and then he would go up and it would take, everyone's yawning. People were even looking around in the seats like, I can't believe he's still doing this.
The press was looking around. At one point, I said something under my breath just out of frustration, and these 2 reporters turned around and kind of looked at me, and I said, I'm sorry. And they said, no, like, we agree.
Yeah,
In other
we're, like,
words,
waiting for this to-
like, please, God, would you move on? I'll tell you, being a criminal defense attorney and a member of the Maryland Criminal Defense Attorneys Association, the National Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys or lawyers, you would think that I'd be saying, oh, Abbe Lowell. Honestly, I would give him an F. It was probably one of the most incompetent defenses I've ever seen.
Is that right?
Yes. First of all, it's not that hard in a sense. Write the perfect closing argument with whatever you have. Now, obviously, there's evidence beyond dispute. One of the pieces of evidence beyond dispute is that Hunter bought a gun. Okay, so you're stuck with certain facts.
Okay.
The other fact beyond dispute is that Hunter has a history of addiction. He wrote a book about it, for God's sake. So you've got facts beyond dispute. But write what you want your closing argument to be. Then develop your defense themes. And then, in a synthesis, develop your cross-examination so that a juror who has not listened to your opening argument, assume you may know opening argument, could understand your themes just by the questions and answers that you develop.
Yeah.
Your theme could be, this witness is a liar, or your theme could be, this witness actually supports our theory of the case, whatever your theory is. For most of the day, I kept saying to Lauren, I have no idea what Abbe Lowell's theory of the case is. I concluded driving home, as we're driving back to Maryland, I think, as far as I can tell, it is this. Hunter Biden was not smoking crack at the time he purchased the gun. Because that's he was letting everything else go. He was getting his brains beat in with the evidence before and after. So I thought it was actually horrible. I likened it to Lauren, who has, obviously, as a student, limited experience, but one of the reasons I don't really like civil work as a lawyer is because depositions are so tedious and boring. Lawyers they just go on for hours and hours and hours about stuff that really doesn't matter. That's what Abby Lowell's cross-examination reminded me of, a civil deposition. It was that bad.
Really?
Yes. In fact, Lauren described it as fishing for information. That's what lawyers do in depositions. He felt like he did not know the answers. I thought he was disrespectful of the jury, of their time, of their attention, and most of all, their intelligence. Because, for example, he spent about an hour with the FBI agent explaining that Hunter Biden could have been using all of this cash to pay for drug rehab and Airbnbs. And he spent a lot of time going through that, which, first of all, most people, I sit there and intellectually resist that a little bit. Like, I don't know, I've never heard of anybody paying for drug rehabilitation with...
I thought they might use their insurance.
Well, right. Well, what happens is, exactly.
That's what they do.
The government gets up there on redirect, puts his credit card up as big as could be, and highlights every time he paid for Airbnbs or drug rehabilitation with his credit card. And then the final question to the agent was something along these lines. Did you find any witness who said they saw Hunter putting, say, $40 or $50 $100 bills in an envelope and mailing it to somebody? And the agent said no. In other words, it wasn't going for Airbnbs, and it wasn't going for. It was awful.
I was kind of just confused what Abby Lowell's strategy was, because, like you said, he was really sticking to this narrow theme of he wasn't doing drugs the moment he bought the gun. Yeah, he might have been doing drugs before he bought the gun.
In the car.
Or after he bought the gun. But no one can prove he was doing drugs or on drugs or an addict when he bought it. And then he goes and makes the jury mad with, going up there, the fishing, the not, like you were saying, like not knowing.
He did some things, if you remember, when he wanted to introduce the picture of the gun store. He turned to the prosecutors, showed them the picture, and said, "Is it okay if I introduce this?" And the Judge Noriega, says, "Mr. Lowell, ask me if that's admissible evidence. They can object if they want, but I decide." Now, there's women on the jury. If I was a male and I had the judge, in effect, correcting me for that, it's clear the judge took a little bit of offense at it.
Yes.
I would have said, this is my go-to, I'd have said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm nervous, I'm making mistakes." Now, the reason I'd say I'm nervous is the jury will forgive you.
And the judge might.
Correct, get back with you. You know what I mean? In other words, "I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm nervous, it's a big case, I'm making silly mistakes, I apologize." That's what it would have taken. Instead, I forget, his answer was basically like something along the lines of, "This is the first time I've done that," or something. I mean, he starts defending his conduct, and you're like, Abby, you're not in elementary school. Just win the audience back. It was...
I thought the judge, since we've brought her up, I loved the way she just handled certain aspects just throughout the day. She really, made sure she ran her courtroom, and I thought she did a really good job of that. She let, she didn't intervene too much and say too much, but when she needed to, she did. And I remember at the end, something that, we both pointed out, when Abby Lowell wanted to keep Gordon Cleveland for the next day, testify for the next day, and he, asks her, because she was going to, let him go, say that he was done. And the judge rolled her eyes at Abby Lowell. She was like, "I mean, I guess." Everyone was fed up with him.
At one point, she basically took a quick recess, told the jury we're going to go a little bit later, for the reason that we'd like this man not to have to come back the next day.
Absolutely.
And Lowell could have respected that, and he didn't. And to me, it's just...
I'm sure the jury picked up on that.
Of course. It's just... anyway. By the way, we were talking about, as I explained to Lauren, I think you need a defense theme to the case. To me, I invented this in the car driving back. They had this case for over a year, as you know, because you told our audience the plea had fallen apart. I'd have said to the jury something along these lines. Addiction's both mental and physical.
This is true.
That Hunter had made a mental commitment to sobriety, evidenced by his repeated efforts at rehab and so forth. He'd hired a sobriety coach, things like that. I'd have said Hunter struggled, as many do, with the physical addiction. Then I would have said on October 12th, when he went to buy the gun, he believed mentally that he was committed to sobriety and was no longer an addict. And perhaps that's denial, but denial is really different than a lie, an intentional lie.
Absolutely.
Denial is kind of that thing where we give ourselves permission to think of us in a better way, perhaps than a coach would or a teacher might. And so I think he could have characterized that, and also the form. And I thought this is completely missed by, in my opinion, the defense. On the opposite side of the form, it said what to do if there's an error, how to correct it, meaning that the form there can be a mistake. The government anticipates mistakes. What do you do if you've made a mistake? And I would have then, if I was Abby Lowell, I would have asked the FBI agent, did anybody go to Hunter and say,
did you make a mistake?
Correct, did you make a mistake? Because if you want to be fair about it, and we do want to be fair, and I'd have pitched that to the jury, you'd simply go to him and say, is this a mistake? And if he said, yes, I was in denial on that occasion, maybe you still go forward, maybe you don't. But at least you tried to put the case in kind of 360. Instead, they dropped it. I mean, I'm sitting there like, Lauren, look at this. I mean, there's language there that any competent attorney could pick up on to make more of a defense. And I know this sounds crazy for me to say as a criminal defense attorney. In my opinion, the defense was so outclassed by these prosecutors. It was embarrassing. It was like two lawyers on one side and a guy who's never been in a courtroom on the other side. So it looked that out. Didn't it look that out, Matt?
I don't want to interrupt you, but that's a great point you had, because one of the things Clarke and I often discussed, we had a case where somebody had committed some kind of shooting, and when they bought the gun, they marked on the form that they didn't have any mental defects when they had indeed been treated. So do you think that more people are guilty of this, meaning like they mark, I'm not a drug user, and that the government overlooks it, and because it was Hunter Biden, it's now full speed ahead? And do you think that this would open the door to more people, like what you said, being with that whole, if there's an error, do you think that would open the door to people saying, well, you know what, I made a mistake if they get caught?
Do you have a thought on this, Lauren?
I do. I think yes and no. I think...
Yes and no to what? To the Hunter Biden thing?
The part where you were saying about, like, is it only coming out because it's Hunter Biden? And it could other random, everyday people be doing this and it just not be paid attention to? And I think that could be the case a little bit, but I also think they got him on the smallest possible thing, like checking the wrong box on a form.
But this is true. But think about what Clarke said. Do you think the government, like the FBI, would go to you and say, did you make a mistake? But when in Hunter Biden's case, they were like, gotcha. Yeah.
I think it was them trying to get something. What do you think?
I saw a federal prosecutor interviewed on television, and he made the point that he had never seen a gun case prosecuted this way. He'd seen felon in possession cases, many of them, and so forth. He'd never quite seen an application, particularly where the gun wasn't used in a crime. In other words, this gun, as everybody knows, was thrown in a trash bin by his former sister-in-law.
Slash ex-girlfriend.
Slash ex-girlfriend. 12 days, I think, after he purchased it or something, there was no, as far as anybody knows, it was never fired or used in a crime. So I think that there was a lot there for the defense. Look, do I think he's guilty? Yes. In other words, do I think that the evidence was sufficient to prove guilt? Yes. However, there were defenses never developed. And whether that might have been enough to persuade jurors who might be sympathetic. Many of the jurors had addiction issues in their family. They said so during the voir dire process. So I think opportunities were missed.
But I think you do have a valid point when you say it could have been a mistake. Not saying that his was, but it's up to the government to investigate it. If that's your job, you have something on the back of the form that...
I would have asked, now I think this would have been a sustained objection, but I would have at least tried to put it in the mind of the jurors. I'd have probably asked the agent a question like this.
Yeah.
And you get into it kind of gently so that it's not objectionable questions. Say, agent, tell us about your career. How many crimes have you investigated? Have you ever investigated an application for a gun?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? If he says no.
This is the first one ever.
Correct. And then now
Ever.
that's admissible for the purpose of showing she might not be experienced. It's probably inadmissible for the purpose of saying the government has selectively prosecuted
Yes.
Biden. But you get it across to the jury.
To the jury, yeah.
And I think I would have probably done that. I'll tell you, I think that the defense was unfocused, no defense theme. The questions were incongruent with the goal.
Mm-hmm.
They wasted the jury's time. They were mildly disrespectful of the court. I give him an F. In other words, that's just honestly I know that he's rumored to charge, Abby Lowell's rumored to charge $1,000 an hour, and millions of dollars have been spent in the defense. And I told Lauren, because I really wanted Lauren to see
Did you say 1,000 an hour?
1,000
That's
hours.
chump change.
Well, I really wanted Lauren to see outstanding lawyering, and I think she did. On the right
On the
side of the
yeah.
courtroom with the U.S. attorney. She saw outstanding lawyering.
First time I ever heard that from Clarke Ahlers. Just, you know.
She saw outstanding
how you know.
judging,
That's how I know
and
it's good.
she saw below par defense. And I think that all sorts of the local lawyers, Warren Brown, Billy Murphy Jr., they would have done such a more effective job just because of the principles. Larry Nathan's a great lawyer, former federal public defender in Baltimore. They would have done such a great job.
Clarke Ahlers.
What's funny, listen,
That's who I would have taken.
I'm no Abby Lowell. I have no reputation like Abby Lowell. I don't travel in his circles. But I would not have made the mistake. I told Lauren, I would not. First of all, I listened as witnesses are testifying. These witnesses were giving the defense wide open doors. Here's this woman saying he was charming and caring, and so I'd have tried to characterize. Instead, you know what came out after Abby Lowell's cross-examination?
What?
He offered a 24-year-old girl crack. He tried to hook this.
Girl
He's
up.
48-year-old man with this 24-year-old stripper that he's now.
That just speaks to his generosity and compassion.
Yeah,
Clarke.
right. But my point is,
all it is.
I remember driving in the car going home with from the courthouse, driving back to Columbia with Lauren, saying, "I'd want to kill him if that was my daughter."
Oh, absolutely.
You know, right?
Absolutely.
But I mean, in other words, if I'm on the jury, instead of making this guy empathetic in any way, you've brought out evidence which is so infuriating that it makes me contemptuous.
But
of
you
the
know how
defendant.
upset I'd be if we were together and he didn't offer me something. I mean, I wouldn't take it, but I'm like, where were you
I hope
brought
you're
up?
being-
Like,
I hope you're being the comedian.
I wouldn't take it, but I'm just
I hope
saying.
you're being the comedian.
Generosity,
because
Clarke Ahlers.
I think it's outrageous conduct. on his
Absolutely.
part. I think
Of course it was.
I think it made him look, if it's possible, to look worse than he looked with his own book going
And
into
the
this
fact
trial.
that he took up with his dead brother's ex-wife. He's the
Yeah.
puff daddy of the
His
whites.
family's getting weird.
Yeah, he's
A
the
lot
puff
of weird
daddy of
stuff
the
going
whites.
on. Yeah, that's how
Terrible
you should
human
have been
being.
out there, Clark.
He's a terrible.
Well, I'm 100% certain that I wouldn't have taken an hour to cross-examine Mr. Cleveland on where the displays were in the gun store.
Yeah.
It had nothing at all to do with the case. And the judge is hinting that this poor guy is a trash truck driver with health issues.
Yeah.
He's got to come back tomorrow, probably lose a day's pay because of this case. Show some respect. And I just think that I think that there's an arrogance at a financial level of the elite in this country that they're so unaware of, that is so unappealing to a jury of, I'll call it everyday people. And I think it came through loud and clear with Abby Lowell's lack of preparation and wandering all over the courtroom with nonsense questions about the color of the floor. Who cares?
And to me, I just think it's such a joke that they're pretending the reason they're prosecuting is that they're worried about this guy who had done drugs who was then in possession of a gun. The government really doesn't care that much about it. Let's stop. You know what I mean? Let's stop.
But
They
that
don't.
didn't come through at all.
At
All.
They
As a
don't.
matter of fact, and I'll just, you know this, Lauren, because Lauren followed the case very, very closely.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, because, well, we were there. It was interesting.
That was just a question. I was like, is that right?
But
I believe
In
it.
closing argument, Leo Wise made a point of pointing at the First Lady and the family and said, who's in the courtroom is not evidence. He was basically saying, don't let the presence of these important people
sway your judgment.
sway your judgment. It's based on the evidence. And the jury did,
And that's a good point, though, because, I mean,
It
they could be
was,
like,
but I mean,
whoa,
a
I'm sitting
7-day
this close to
I was thinking that. I'm like, oh my gosh,
6
First
day
Lady's right there.
taking selfies.
6-day trial and 3 hours of deliberation, guilty on all counts.
Yeah.
You can't do much worse.
This is true. This is true. Unless you're Donald Trump, then.
I have to say, I
34
feel like after, I mean, we were only there one day of the whole trial, and I could have told you that they were going to be guilty.
Well, I
on all
didn't
three
make that
counts.
prediction. I went into the trial uncertain, or went into the courtroom uncertain what the verdict
Me too,
might be.
yeah.
But at the end, I was certain it wasn't going to be an acquittal. I thought maybe you'd hang some jurors that were sympathetic to the Bidens. They're very important people in the state of Delaware.
Yeah.
Or
And the
because-
nation, I mean.
Right. Or they're just sympathetic. Right. But the jury was pulled from Delaware.
That's there.
So, the Bidens are particularly important in Delaware. And I thought maybe you'll have somebody that has some sympathy. Maybe somebody will have sympathy because of the addiction issues. But Abby Lowell even called his daughter. His daughter said some very nice things about that. And then the government gets up there. We weren't there for that day. But the government gets up there with text messages sent to the daughter within hours of when the daughter's supposed to meet her father, saying he's buying crack from Mookie at the 7-Eleven. And, it's just, seriously, it's so bad. And one of the jurors who has been interviewed by the media since the trial made the comment that Abby Lowell hurt the case by calling the daughter that the jury resented.
How old's the daughter? I don't.
Adult. She's
Okay,
married.
an adult,
I believe
okay.
she's married. Naomi. So clearly an adult, but still, I mean, look, what daughter doesn't love her father and want the best for her drug-addicted father? And the other thing which was weird, and we literally saw this, Hunter walks in with the book he's written.
Oh, like he's like,
Like it's the Bible.
yeah, and
That's
like he's
what I'm
trying to
talking about,
sell
his-
some more
his
copies.
arrogance. That's what I mean by, I'm sure the jury was like, knock it off.
Well, I mean, what it struck me, I guess you could say maybe he's trying to sell copies on Amazon or something. I don't know. But it just struck me as kind of
Tone deaf.
I did it and I wrote about it.
correct.
And now I'm going to get away with it.
Correct. And exactly. The small little thing had the exact. Lauren, you put it better than I could have put it. Exactly. I just knew that it grated on me as I'm watching it. And you're exactly right.
It would have graded on
I
me
did
if I
it.
was a
I
juror.
wrote about it, and I'm going to get away
Yep.
with it.
Yep.
And that's how you feel. And he's walking past a picture of his father, the President of the United States, at the metal detector. It was.
What I
and
say,
one of the
Clarke,
things
the
we
arrogance.
should- one other thing we should just tell quickly is that Lauren had to be intercepted by the Secret Service. I don't know if she's willing to. I don't know if she's willing to tell this story publicly.
did.
Or not.
You
But
didn't
when-
take your brass
once-
knuckles out of your purse?
Once she
Lauren?
told me about it, I was like, "Oh my Lord, Lauren."
Lauren's
No,
brass
it
knuckles.
I'm so
was-
glad I'm not picking you up at the federal detention.
Was lunch break, and I had to use the bathroom, and we go out, and there's security everywhere. There's Secret Service, president's wife is there and son, so that was expected. But even I actually thought there would be more security than there was.
I will say,
I was kind of
I
like,
will. I don't want to say in a sense because I wouldn't want some crazy to ever hurt our country. But maybe there was security we didn't see, but it did not seem
That could
like
be
it
the
was
case.
all that much security.
no, I thought like they were gonna need my like ID or just at least have my name down, and they didn't. So,
No, nobody asks your name when you go in.
no,
You go through the
and I
metal detector.
almost
Really?
ended up in the bathroom with the first lady. I was
Really?
hand on the door to the bathroom, and then the Secret Service was like, "Oh no, ma'am, you can't go in there." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." But I think they weren't paying attention to me. If I'm being completely honest, I was definitely the youngest person in that courtroom, and I think I just somehow slipped by a few of them at least and almost got in there.
Well, when she told me about it, I thought, well, that's interesting. She got within a doorway of the first lady before she was intercepted.
Yes.
Well, I guess that concludes our discussion of this. Any closing remarks for our listeners?
I don't have anything. I think we went over most of it. It was a very interesting trial. It was my first trial that I've ever seen. So for it to
Wow,
be...
you started. That's.
Yeah, it's...
So when Lauren
They're all
goes
going to go
with me-
downhill.
So if Lauren goes to court with me on a driving while suspended, she's going to be very unimpressed.
She'll be sleeping.
Right, exactly.
But no, I was
Wake up,
grateful
Lauren,
for
wake
the
up.
opportunity. It was a really, really cool trial to be at. And, you know, my classmates that I've told about it already are just, they're in awe. They're all jealous.
And she's going to post a picture of Clarke
Yes,
and Lauren
of us
in front
right
of the
out
United
front.
States District
Oh,
Court.
that's cool.
Well, thank you all very much. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Black and White Thin Blue Lines. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram,
TikTok. All of the social media.
yes, and wherever you listen to your podcast, there'll be an audio
And thank you for
version.
being here, Lauren. I
Yes,
know
thank you guys for having me.
we can't say it enough because I'm sure our audience has gotten tired of listening to us. Just me and Clarke, or Clarke and I. So thank you for being here to make it a little more interesting.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
But life is never easy. There's work to be done and obligations to be met, obligations to truth, to justice, and to liberty.
This podcast is the copyrighted property of Black and White and Thin Blue Lines Incorporated, a Maryland corporation. Any rebroadcast of the podcast without the written permission of the owner is prohibited. For more information, we invite you to visit the website blackandwhiteandthinbluelines.com. All of the words in the URL address use common spelling and are typed together with no spaces. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we welcome your remarks through email. The email addresses of the co-creators, Serge Antonin and Clarke Ahlers, may be found on the website.